Hello, it's Phil Crowshaw again from the Journey podcast. And yes, we're live again. We're live on Tinternet and we're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube all at the same time. There's no end to this technical wizardry. And today, my guest to talk insights, ideas, and inspiration is the wonderful Judith Rafferty. And Judith is going to be talking to me today about all sorts of different things. I'll let her introduce herself in a minute because she'll do a much better job than me. So what we'll do is we'll begin just by playing the counter. Those of you that watched this show before will know how it works now. And then give people a chance to come in as they've just millions across the world, as I always say, have now had the notification. They're scrambling to check out me and Judith. And then we woke up, Judith? So really looking forward to talking to you all this morning. Please ask questions if you want, just comment or just say hello. It's all okay. It's all cool. We're all very happy to see you doing that. Okay, so here we go. Let's go. Okay, so a very warm welcome, good morning, and welcome to the Journey podcast. And today, as I say, I'm delighted to be joined by Judith Rafferty. So very warm welcome to the Journey podcast, Judith. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Hello, thanks for having me on here. It's and your kind introduction. Really been looking forward to it. So my name is Judith. I'm essentially a word bird, a content and copywriter right here in sunny Manchester.
Wonderful. So when you say a word bird, is that politically correct bird, or is that bird as in Flappy Bird?
Well, it's a colloquialism, I suppose, isn't it? And at the end of the day, I suppose we're with the word bird. We have got the Twitter association these days.
We do.
I'm not being too horribly un-PC, hopefully.
Yeah, that's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very un-PC a lot of the time, but there you go. So very warm welcome then. So let's start off then by just talking to us about what exactly is copywriting in the context of your work.
It can be a couple of things, really. And notice that when I introduce myself, and I do this very regularly, I always say I'm a content and copywriter rather than just a copywriter. People have always traditionally said I'm a copywriter, and certainly with the way that marketing has progressed over the years, you will be completely au fait with this, Phil. Content has become such a big part of our world that, and it's not covered by copywriting. They are two completely different things. Many of us do both. I do myself, but a lot of content writers don't actually do copywriting, even though they call themselves copywriters. And here's the difference. Content is designed to inform, educate, entertain, and amuse. So we're talking something like a blog post for your website. Social media, of course, comes absolutely smack bang in that category. Whereas copywriting is to cajole your audience into taking a particular action, whether that's signing up for something, making an appointment with you, or of course putting their hands in the pockets and giving you some money, making a sale, selling. So they are very different things. There's very different ways of going about them, and they serve different ends.
Excellent. Okay, love it. So we live in an age whereby people have got the attention span of a gnat, and that's on a good day. And we live in an age where everything seems to be moving, and I don't think that's just my perception. I think it's generally true. Everything seems to be moving faster and faster towards what I would call multimedia, rich media, as they sometimes call it, which is, I'm kind of more steeped in audio and video type material. Do you think there's a tendency to go rushing off to the dynamic world of video and audio material and kind of leave the text and the words behind a little bit, as if it's, dare I use the term, old-fashioned? Do you think that's something that is tending to happen or not?
I don't, because at the end of the day, we're not going to go back to the age of silent films, are we? So, words, when you ask the question, what do words mean to your business? Well, they mean absolutely flipping everything, don't they, at the end of the day? So with rich media, multimedia, whatever type we're going to put on it, words are still needed. The right words, or whatever sort of fancy gifts you're using, or amazing sort of TikTok strategies you have, you are still not going to be resonating with your target audiences. You don't get, you might get garner a bit of attention, get a few laughs or whatever, but the content, your words are still at the heart of what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because people have been talking for a long time about creators having and getting writer's block. And I think it's the same, arguably, for any creative person or anybody involved in the creative arena. It's like writing a podcast script, for example. You can have a writer's block. Some days you're just thinking you've got loads of ideas and it's just flowing almost like a river down a hill. And other days it's like pushing snow up a hill,
Yeah.
and it's just as if you've got mush in your head. Is that something that you see quite a bit in your work?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, personally, yes, so of course, we're all only human, aren't we? We all have, days when we're absolutely on it, and days like you say, where the content paralysis, as I call it, is rife and painful. So yeah, it's the struggle is real, isn't it? And of course the struggle is even more real to keep trying to come up with something a bit fresh, I think, isn't it? The biblical term, there is nothing new under the sun. Of course, it's absolutely true, but it's something that we're all striving for, isn't it? I think, just to try and cut through the noise by saying things, in a reframed way.
That's a really good point, actually. That's a great point, because I would say, now you've said it, I would say that I'm constantly, like probably most of us are, I'm constantly thinking of what I might term that as different angles. Just like you, I've been around a bit, and I know quite a lot of stuff because I've been around a little bit, and I've got a bald head, so that helps. You get to know a lot of stuff, but you're always thinking about how can you present it, or what can you talk about that's different.
Yeah.
And one of the areas that I talk to a lot of guests about, and I'm thinking about this as I'm talking, one of the areas I talk to a lot of guests about is the future. The future of their kind of art, as it were, which I'll mention now, soon as I've raised it, and how it's going to change and how it's going to develop. And I think part of the reason for that is that's quite a new, that's relatively fertile area, isn't it? It's an area of, you're almost like saying to people, put yourself in the shoes of Nostradamus for 10 minutes, and just give me your thoughts on. So I'll say this to you now. Give me your thoughts on how you think what you do will change. And it's obviously I know I'm dropping you in it here, but it's just in your opinion.
Yes, you
How
are.
how you don't worry. How you think it might change in the future? I've seen recently, as an example, I've seen recently artificial intelligence being talked about in terms of apps you can get or software that you can get where you'll enter a few key elements and the AI will then write something for you, a podcast script for you. Do you think that's likely to develop further over time, or do you think it'll just be one of those things that comes and goes as a fad?
I do think it'll develop further without a shadow of a doubt. But and there is a huge but. It's exactly the same sort of premise as, for example, the language translation tools that we have online. Yes, they can be brilliant, but they don't have human mind at the end of the day. So, in the case of something like language translation, what they're in danger of getting horribly wrong are things like the localization, for a start, and those nuances of human language. Something, for example, that might be funny or amusing in the English language could mean something completely different and be rude or offensive in another language. So the literal translation doesn't work, or those tools can work but still being checked back by a professional human translator. And I think that's exactly the way that these tools like Jarvis, for example, will go in the future. Yes, people will use them. We're all looking for ways all the time, aren't we, to be more productive, to use our time more effectively, and to save time, money and resources. But they still haven't got a human brain and a human sense of humor and a human soul behind them.
Yeah, that I agree. Actually, I absolutely agree. And I think the word that springs to mind there is context, isn't it? There has to be context behind a lot of things. Interestingly, I was contacted recently on an email by somebody who asked me if I'd be interested in trialing something that we're doing involving virtual coaching. And when I said, well, that sounds very interesting, but what is it? They were talking about they're developing apps now that would allow, say, me and you to be in a room doing this, but together in a virtual environment. So I mean, this is this is head screw stuff, real geeky stuff. So obviously my avatar would definitely have hair on its head. So that'd be the first thing I'd have to have to do, because I've not seen that
Hey,
for so
we'd
long.
be popping up on the screen, wouldn't we? You and I, Phil, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie.
Brad Pitt. Now that's something I've not been called before. Maybe Yul Brynner. Yeah, but funny enough, you'll probably know who Yul Brynner is. Most 99% of people won't have a clue who I'm talking about.
I grew up with the King and I, Phil.
Yeah, this. I don't know if you find this though. I find this as I've got older, the references I make to the past in terms of characters, TV programs, music, anybody kind of who's with you or involved in talking about it, who's under, say, I don't know, say under 30, look at you as if you're absolutely totally nuts.
Yeah, absolute dinosaur.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I know that your background includes numerous areas, including sales and business development. How have you observed that sales has changed over the last, I don't know, 15 years or so or more, in terms of the approach, people's psychology, people's attitudes towards it, process? What are your views on it?
I think sales has changed a lot, hasn't it? So certainly, narrowing it down from the past 15 years, to the past 3 years, you could write books, and I'm sure people have written numerous books, about the way that sales has changed within that period of time. It's looking back, sort of to just dinosaur time again, the sort of 90s, the early noughties. there was very much that perception, wasn't there? And it was a genuine perception, of that earn and burn mentality, and those stalking salespeople, the door knocking, and pursuing you on the phone, and I've seen that, and I've worked in teams in the past where that certainly happened, and you're making 200 phone calls a day, and all that sort of nonsense, and of course it's come full circle now, hasn't it, to a more collaborative way of selling, I would say, a more compassionate way of selling, certainly during the pandemic, and hopefully that's gonna stick around. Where salespeople are kind of getting into the groove a little bit more, that they do actually have two ears and one mouth, and we're listening more to what our customers actually need, and where they are at, what are their problems at the moment? What are they struggling with? Are they having redundancies? Were they furloughed? Blah blah blah. So yeah, I think it's much more of a relationship sales and marketing experience, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And very interesting stuff. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put a question up now from Howard Jones. I'm sure that's not the Howard Jones that I was a big fan of when I was a child, playing synthesizers at the Apollo in Manchester.
Well, that was sprung to my mind too.
Yeah, because he's changed his, Howard, you've changed your career a little bit, if that's the case. I bet he gets that all the time. I'm sorry for saying that. But there you go, Howard. Question from Howard for you there, Judith. Is NLP still important in copywriting?
I do. You're going to get a short and very unsatisfactory answer from me on this one, I'm afraid, Howard. I don't know NLP. Simple as.
Yeah, it's
I know what NLP is. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. I would say that, and again, it's my view. I would say that NLP is arguably as kind of I don't know whether you call it an 80s or a 90s thing, but I suspect there's still elements of it that do make a lot of sense. I personally think, and this is a real challenge actually, is that we live in an age of what I would call relationship selling. It's the classic line that's been around since Noah was a boy, people still buy people. But I think the challenge is to build relationships with people takes time. And when you're under pressure, and I think this is particularly true of today, when you're under so much pressure to get the results and hit the numbers, and especially in the last 6, 9, 12 months as we've gone into post-pandemic, and a lot of businesses are under a lot of pressure, you're always trying to, and I find this, you're always trying to find that balance between wanting to be attentive and wanting to communicate, but not at the same time, but not being too overly pushy or overly enthusiastic, shall we say, because people can smell it, can't they? People can smell it a mile off. I suppose the word is desperate.
Yeah, spammy is a word I use quite a lot for that sort of behaviour. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, and we are certainly still using techniques like, we build ideal client avatars or buying personas, or whatever you want to call them. I will regularly speak to my clients, to really sort of laser focus in on who we're speaking to with their copy and content. Who are these people? Not only the demographics, but most importantly, what are their pain points? What's keeping them awake at night? And how can we help to plug that gap for them, or provide a solution to whatever problem they're experiencing. So to that degree, there is certainly very much enormous psychology going on around content and copywriting, but like NLP specifically, I'm not an NLP expert. I've never studied NLP, so
yeah. I think probably one of the books that I'm a huge fan of, possibly in my top 10, which would arguably fit into that question, Howard, in terms of copywriting and marketing and selling, is Robert Cialdini's book, which is The Science and Power of Influence, or something close to that. Because he talks a lot about the psychology. Now, that is a book that's been around. I mean, that must be over 20 years old now, I reckon. And he talks about areas that would be very familiar to us now. So he talks about the scarcity principle. You know, we want something more if there's going to be only a few left. It's what I often call the Microsoft Xbox syndrome, where, you know, come November, it's get your Xbox because there's a big shortage of chips. So you better buy it now or you'll lose out on the Xbox. Fear of missing out, it's known as in the modern age, isn't it? FOMO. So he talks a lot about that, which I think is very true still. Social proof he talks about as well, which of course is testimonials and what other people say about it. So you've seen a huge increase in the use of things like TripAdvisor is a good example, Amazon reviews. That's because, and a lot of the reason that's a great book is because it really does look at the psychology of it. And I know, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of people realize, and some people don't realize, that the supermarkets put tens of thousands of pounds into the psychological way in which we buy when we're walking around the supermarket. And I interviewed somebody about it a few years ago, and even I was astonished at the level of influence they can put on you, because we think we're making logical decisions, don't we? We're convinced we're making logical decisions, but in reality, we're a bit like lambs to the slaughter in a lot of cases.
Yeah, we're following the carrots, aren't we? Certainly.
Yeah. No,
and
absolutely.
from a copywriting perspective too, just to sort of round off on that one a little, so Howard doesn't think I'm completely clueless. Of course, it's you know, it's all leading to the wonderful term tone of voice from copy and content writing perspective, to understand your ideal client avatar, or whatever you want to call them, and of course to adopt the, you know, the relevant tone of voice and vocabulary, etc., that's going to speak to them where they are at.
Yeah,
you know, obviously, if you're writing for a corporate law firm, you are going to be using a different vocab and tone of voice than you would be, you know, if you were writing for a youth brand of some description.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's very true as well. And I mean, there's a kind of a relatively new thing, which I say it's a new thing. It's only something I've really come conscious of in the last few years, which is something that's not been around before then, was what's known as personal brand. And I think it's the personal brand is the whole idea that we all have to have a persona ourselves, and our personal brand is really key to our overall success. And that's true of careers as well as small businesses and self-employment. So I guess it's fair to say that that tone of voice is really important if you want to build a personal brand.
It is, but by the same token, if you are, for example, a sole trader like myself, my voice, as you're hearing it now, is my tone of voice, because I'm very authentic, buzzword, and I think that's really the key to most small business owners building a personal brand, the authenticity, because of that. Of course, that's what's going to attract, another buzzword, your tribe.
Yeah, I actually think something you mentioned there. I don't think that a lot of businesses, I don't think, put enough time and effort into understanding that target market, or that, as you said, that avatar, as we call it in marketing. It seems that because of the way in which we work these days, and everything seems to be too broad, or very, you know, let's get the next lead, the next lead, the next lead, the next lead, the next. And I do think we don't go deep enough into understanding the real drivers, the real ways in which what makes our target market tick.
Yeah.
And
I
because
agree completely.
it's volume, isn't it? It's volume
Yeah.
driven rather than going deeper, especially business to business.
I can remember it hit me like a ton of bricks years ago. I was on a little training course, and it was about marketing and branding, etc., for the small business owner. I was doing it, as much to increase my own, knowledge to pass on to my clients as I was for myself. But it was just as relevant for my own business. And this woman literally said this one line: "Guys, we're not talking to the mothership." And that line has stayed with me ever since. And of course, it's that old adage, isn't it? If you try to sell to everybody, you're going to sell to nobody. And that's absolutely 100% true of a small business. Yeah, potentially everybody in the whole world might be interested in using my copywriting services, but they're not really, are they? So
I think part of the reason it happens
down, isn't it? To again, going back to the psychological side of defining exactly who you're speaking to, and then having conversations with them in their language.
It does, and I think part of the reason I think it happens is it's hard. It's quite hard to pinpoint very specifically who is going to be your target market. It takes a lot of work and a lot of patience and a lot of research, which is hard.
Yes, it is hard.
And anything, as we know, anything that creates any kind of friction or resistance in our world, especially in our lives in this day and age, a snowflake. I thought I just had to say it. It's hard to do that. I know certainly when we look at, as you know, Judith, we are getting much more now into podcast training and live stream training and all that stuff. And actually trying to pinpoint exactly who you're targeting can be quite tricky. But you have to do it, because if you're going to do Facebook ads, for example, you have to decide what exactly is it you're targeting, because you have to enter that criteria into the Facebook ad machine.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It is difficult. I mean, for example, I have two ideal client, avatars, personas, and that's absolutely fine. Businesses may have multiple, but it's always remaining very sort of crystal clear and laser focused, on directing your messages to those people, and the more defined and the more compact about it you can be, the less confusion you're throwing out there. As you've said, we've all got the attention span of a goldfish these days. So the more sort of different, I've got some messages over there and some over here, and there's a lot going on. People are less likely to pick up on what you're putting out there, because you're just confusing them, and we haven't got time and we can't be bothered. What are they talking about?
Yeah, there's a big debate on YouTube about length of video, which is all linked into this kind of conversation. But it's fascinating that, and I think it links very much into what you just said a minute ago, Judith, about tribe. I think people are quite tribal about the YouTube videos side of things, especially like maybe slightly older people. I follow him or her or them because they resonate with me. I like what they say. They entertain me. And I find myself, even though I've got the attention span challenges that everybody else has, I will sit and watch and listen to a YouTube video of somebody I'm interested in for 40 minutes, 35, 40 minutes without a problem at all. But then, of course, I'm older, so I don't know whether that's because I'm older or whether it's just the fact that I feel like I'm part of that tribe of that particular channel.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I don't think it's a generational thing. Even though younger the younger generation, maybe more sort of a social media and tech savvy in general. But no, I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. When they've got you, they can really bend and shape you because you will go with them.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing, isn't it? To be able to define your market so clearly and to speak to them so directly that we're just begging for more.
Yeah, that's right. And then of course they put the links. Oh, I've got a discount on this particular product or thing. Obviously, one of my areas of interest, of course, is cameras and microphones and all the geeky, nerdy stuff around that, as you might expect. So those sorts of people who are doing those sorts of channels, I'm a lamb to the slaughter. If they review a product and they think it's good, I know, like, and trust them. And of course, that's the key, isn't it? Getting the know, like, and trust, as we know. But the reality is, of course, I've never met them, but they've said enough or performed enough for me to be able to know, like, and trust them enough to click on that link underneath and buy that product. Which of course is what influencer marketing is. That's why Instagram has exploded. That's why there's multi-millionaire girls of about 21 years old, because their tribe know, like, and trust them. And if they say that this makeup is amazing, they all flock to buy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, what a funny old world we live in, don't we?
Oh, blimey, yeah. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So let's just move on now then to what your thoughts and observations are about the world of, I suppose, small business in particular, post-pandemic. It seems from my observations that it's slow to come back. It seems to be, and I'm not quite sure how much of that is as a result of the pandemic and coming back from the pandemic, or how much of that is influenced by everything's about cost of living. Your gas is going up, your petrol's going up, your electric's going up, food. I mean, we went out for a meal for my wife the other day, and we estimated it was about 25% more for that meal than it would have been about a year or two ago. So I'm not sure. Have you got any views on that? Is it post pandemic, or is it just simple fact that everybody's watching the budgets a lot closer?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an unwanted sort of obstacle, isn't it? That's cropped up just as we were starting to boom again. Really, business starting to boom again post pandemic. But do you know what? I think for the creative and flexible small business owner. And let's be honest, there are millions of you out there. Heavens above, we've all had to, prove that to ourselves and to the world over the unusual past few years. Often, under the most disadvantageous circumstances possible. Let's be honest. It's always, there's always opportunity, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
And I think we've done it now. We've faced the absolute worst. I can remember as you can, Phil. I was in business back in sort of 2008, 2009, when we all went through the so-called credit crunch that then developed into a full-blown recession. Now looking back at what we've just been through with the pandemic as small business people, that was just a practice run, wasn't it, back then? We can do anything now.
That's funny. I said this on the show the other day, actually, and I said that somebody had asked me what it's like being a small business, and I said, well, without being, not without being sort of light on the whole idea of war, which you've got to kind of say these days because everybody's being triggered about everything. But it's like being at the Somme in the First World War, metaphorically speaking. Where you run out over the Somme and there's missiles and bullets flying everywhere. And just as you think there's a calm, then the next missile or bullet comes along. And flexibility and being nimble. And I think the word is, and I know we used the word a lot, pivot during the pandemic, which is which is true. But I just call it being adaptable. You've got to be adaptable. But there's no doubt about it. Sometimes, Judith, it can be draining. Actually,
It can be absolutely soul destroying. You know, we're all in the same boat, aren't we? As sole traders or small business owners. You know, I will always describe it, because I've worked for myself for nearly 16 years now, and when people, oh, you know, how is it? You know, how do you find it? And I will always say, by this point, it can be either the most exhilarating or the most soul destroying thing in the whole wide world.
It's kind of like extremes,
when
isn't
the going
it?
is good, you're up on cloud 9, and when the going isn't good, you feel like the only person on the planet.
Yeah. It is. It's very true, and it's not. But I don't know it strikes me as well that over the last, I don't know, decade probably, entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial journeys have become a lot cooler than they were. You know, there was a time back in my day when I was a kid where it was almost like anybody that couldn't do an O level, it was O levels then, couldn't do an O level would end up being self-employed because they didn't have the intelligence to get exams. But now, I guess, mainly driven by the likes of Dragon's Den and then of course Steve Jobs, and more recently Mark Zuckerberg and everything. It seems as if it's quite cool to be an entrepreneur, or cool, or even just the very idea of being free from being told what to do. That seems to be one of the drivers I see.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly the cool factor, isn't there? It's not an easy option, is it? Let's be honest. You know, I would always say to anybody, you know, it's not for everybody. I see myself going about my everyday business, just sort of coming back to copy and content. I love working with young businesses. You know, they still have that sort of honeymoon glow about them. You know, that we maybe had. You know, sort of back in the Bronze Age or whatever. You know, and you know, it's infectious. You know, it's inspiring, isn't it? But it's a really odd experience sometimes. You know, like you say, you know, we've been around for, you know, we know lots of things. You know, like Tyrion Lannister said in Game of Thrones, I drink and I know things. And I can
I like
almost
that.
predict sometimes, you know, and you know, I certainly wouldn't, you know, reveal anything, but I can sometimes predict. I know that you are going to be back in a job in 2 years' time, because everything that you're giving to me is telling me that you aren't going to cut it yourself.
Yes.
It's very
Yes.
strange. Yeah.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How your instincts get stronger and stronger every year that goes by, and you are becoming a little bit like Nostradamus.
Yeah,
Because
and
you can
people, you
see.
know, generally, you know, you know, there's the entrepreneurial side, isn't there? You know, where people may be inventors or have this amazing idea or something, or in the vast majority of cases, with people that I work with, for example, on something like building a website for them or doing blog post packages for them, or something of that nature. You know, they will have got to a certain level within their career, as I did myself, you know, made the way up the greasy pole in corporate land, and got to that point where, for whatever reason, thought, do you know what, I'm going to have a go at doing this for myself. So they are usually very good at what they do, but it's everything else that goes behind running a business, and that's a completely different scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the areas which I'd sometimes, I think as a country or as a world maybe even, but as a country, one of the things I am concerned about is what seems to be a significant deterioration in resilience. You know, I'm all for being positive, but arguably, and I've got a couple of young kids myself, arguably I'd rather they were just resilient, because we are in an age of what feels like entitlement, or we have been. And of course, now the entitlement is no longer, or is slowly but surely slipping away, whether it's railways, whether it's NHS, whether it's jobs, and I think we're in for a turbulent time one way or another. And I think the ones that survive will probably be resilient more than anything else. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, resilient and creative, without a doubt. And of course, that's where the cream will always rise to the top, so to speak, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because again, just going back to what we've just experienced with the pandemic, all the pivoting and side hustling and different opportunities that people have sought and been extremely successful with, in order to react in that particular case to the situation that we were finding ourselves in, without warning and through no fault of our own. It makes it quite a democratized playing field.
It does.
And
Yeah.
that's the wonderful thing, for the entrepreneur or the little sole trader, in the back bedroom office with a big dream. It's and we have the tools now, just again coming, reverting back to the content and copywriting side. We have the most amazing tools now, like social media, for example, like what we are doing now, podcasting, all the different marketing tools that again really help to democratize content.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you raised that, because you were telling me off air just before we came on air. We were chatting about this whole area of live streaming and podcasting and video. And you were saying that you've started to do video clips now. And you were saying to me about the fact that I was quite surprised, because I've seen some of those clips and you obviously come across very confident. But you were saying that if I'd said to you 3 years ago that you'd be doing this, you'd have thought I was totally bonkers. Just talk me through that.
Get out of here. Yeah, again, that it was a result, and thank goodness, thank goodness that happened, something to sort of, pull me down from my ivory tower momentarily, as it did with absolutely millions of us globally. Busy getting on with our busy lives, and then all of a sudden we didn't have busy lives anymore. And when you've worked all your life, an absolute sort of eye opener. So I did various courses, and worked with a couple of new mentors and things to actually utilize the time to its best potential, especially during the sort of first 12 months, where business was absolutely shocking, wasn't it? Everybody was on spending freezes, and it was just, I think we were all sort of living our lives on Zoom networking events and LinkedIn, weren't we, at the time? And that was when I was first told, try video, recording video clips. Try going live, make it private so nobody else can see it, just to get yourself used to actually seeing yourself on the screen and hearing your own voice. And it's horrid, isn't it? Because none of us really like the sound of our own voices. But yeah, I think it's a brilliant opportunity. It's for free, for God's sake. It's free marketing. It doesn't cost us a penny. Yes, it's absolutely horrible to tackle, especially if it's not your bag. It really is a shocker. But I think, if you can just stick with it, go softly, take little baby steps, record little video clips. That's what I tend to do now. I pre-record little video clips just with a hint or a tip about content and copywriting, and off they go, on a weekly basis on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. And what a great way to, as we were saying before, 30 seconds is within I think that's the golden sort of time frame at the moment, isn't it, for video clips, under the 30-second mark, before they get a bit too war and peace for people to stick with you. And
Yeah, it's interesting.
they want to see your face, they want to hear your voice. That's you showing people your authentic self, isn't it? And shining that unique brilliance that we all have on the world.
Yeah, that's right. I would agree with you. You'd expect me to agree with you, but I do think that's the case. And I think the point really is that if you accept the fact that being seen and heard is a critical part of any kind of marketing or personal brand journey, if you accept that fact, then the next obvious question is then, well, how are you going to be seen and heard? And then you have to say, well, how do you, I used to use the term earlier, Judith, that how are you going to cut through the noise? Because it's very, very noisy. And one of the things I've heard people say is, well, everybody's doing it now. The reality is actually they're not. The perception is they are, but they're not. I can count on one hand the number of people I know around the whole of the northwest of England who I know who are actually doing any kind of live stream.
Mm-hmm.
And any kind of video I could probably only probably count on two hands.
Yes, so no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Everybody most certainly isn't doing it, and I think one of the key reasons is that at the end of the day, we're all human beings, aren't we? We don't want to sound stupid. We're like, oh, I'm good. How are people going to perceive me? Are they going to think I sound absolutely ridiculous? And you know what? I think, I've certainly come to the point in my life where I am completely at peace with the fact that I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and everybody in the world isn't going to be my cup of tea. Simple as that's human nature, isn't it? And I think it's also really productive to embrace our our humanity, isn't it? If we are, if I, for example, now, suddenly froze, or was tripping up on my words, or completely lost my thread, that's fine. That's absolutely cool. It happens in life. It happens to every single one of us as human beings in some sort of business situation. So rather than panicking about it, just laugh at yourself, own your mistake, and for God's sake, I really need to get my brain into gear and my teeth in today, don't I? Because the people will appreciate your authenticity and your humanity for a start. And going back to those ideal clients, who are watching you and lurking in the background and potentially thinking of doing business with you, they will love you all the more for it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think it will grow. I think you're right in what you said about the pandemic and people starting to go on Zoom, kicking and screaming. There was a lot of talk, wasn't at the start, about, oh my God, I can't possibly go on Zoom. I've got I keep seeing that spot on my head, or that bump on my nose, or whatever, or whatever, dimple in my chin, whatever it is. I keep seeing it, and it's horrible. But I think it's a great example of where when you're forced into it and you have no choice, you do take decisions and do some interesting things when you've got no choice.
Yeah, you can either be stuck in the mud, can't you? Or just put yourself outside the comfort zone. Another phrase that we've used a lot over the last few years. You might not like it, and if you absolutely deplore it and it definitely isn't for you, then okay, there are other sort of mechanics that you can use, aren't there? If you don't want to be seen, you might want to be heard, or but yeah, just try these things. Try it.
Yeah,
Because it's free.
I heard somebody say, just turn up, is what somebody said to me a little while
Turn
ago. And
up.
I thought that's a good way of putting it, actually, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Right. Well, final question I'll ask you is on content, going back to content. When you're working with clients on content nowadays, are you having to work harder to come up with the more edgy, more noise cutting content for a client? Is there pressure, not necessarily to you, but for the business to become something a bit more quirky, perhaps, is what springs to mind? Is that the case, or do you just tend to stick in the lane?
It's it's really client dependent. It's all sort of going back to, who they are, what their brand tone of voice is and what they stand for as a business. And of course, as always, and most importantly, coupled with who their target audiences are and where they are. So it's a completely sort of relative thing on a client by client basis. You know, I always try and go down the line. And this particular session, you may not believe it, but I do believe that less is more. So always, rather than rambling on and on, being as succinct as possible in the way that you say things. War and peace, it has its place. And again, it's relative to the client. Some clients, very short form content and snappy, clicky, where you literally, put those one single word in a sentence, da da da, remarkable, or da da da, surprising, something like that, or at the other end of the scale, of course, I have clients, where we're talking, the longer form, sort of 2000 plus, more in-depth kind of authority pieces. So yeah, it's all relative.
Horses for courses and all those sorts of things.
Yes,
Yeah, it's true. And one of the main reasons podcasting, I think, has taken off to the degree it has, and it's taken off in the UK, but it's certainly taken off in America, is mainly because you can do something else whilst you're listening to stuff. So you can be running, you can be walking, you can be working. So even with this, yes, this is what you might call more long form content, but people can listen to it whilst they're doing something else. They can, open it up on the phone and listen to it. They don't have to look at my bald head all day. They can just listen to it. And I think that's one of the main reasons podcasts has taken off, is because people can do other things whilst they're listening to stuff.
Yes, absolutely agree. It's, everybody's sitting there on the bus and the tram, aren't they? When they're commuting with the little earpods in. So, it's certainly a brilliant means of consuming content, isn't it? And there's so many amazing podcasts out there.
There are. Right. And on that note, Judith, I will say au revoir until I'll see you next time. Lovely to have met you. And obviously we met on a great example of an online networking group working, because we met on the online Simply Networking group. So it was great to meet you then. And it was great to have you on the show. And thanks for following through as well, because a lot of people will say, oh yeah, I'll quite like the idea of doing that, and then don't take the action.
But
so,
you know what,
thank
though,
you very much.
just before we sign off, that's a good example, isn't it, really? Something else, purely since lockdown started, I've been guests on various sort of podcasts and video podcasts and things. I think the first time I was absolutely terrified. They're thinking, what's this all about? Am I going to come across as an utter idiot? Because we've all got that awful imposter syndrome and 10 million other things. So yes, turn up, like you said, turn up.
Yeah, but it's true. It's a self-awareness is a massive thing, actually. And it's interesting to hear you saying about you've got strong self-awareness and that realization that you'll not be everybody's cup of tea, and not getting all freaked out about it and not allowing it to hold us back. I think that self-awareness for me is probably the most grateful thing I was grateful for, is having pretty strong self-awareness. So I think that's something that's a blessing, having that.
Yeah, it certainly makes the journey a bit more livable, doesn't it? But yes, absolutely, it's that attract and also repel principle, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the people, who, are looking at, oh, well, what an absolute flipping idiot she is. Well, they aren't going to be my ideal clients anyway, are they? They aren't going to make an enquiry about working with me, or, of course they aren't, if I'm not resonating with them as a human being. So,
yeah, so true.
Repel.
Yeah, so true. So true. Right. Thanks very much indeed, Judith. It's an absolute
Thank
pleasure
you.
as always. And now I think it's fair to say we know each other a lot better. So I'm sure I'll see you out on the road, as Mad Max I think once said. And take care. And thanks for joining me today on the Journey podcast. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Great. Take care.